Rosenborough,
Here.
Tony Lathrop,
Here.
Megan Phillips,
Here.
Brad Lael. Saw Brad earlier. He may not be back, but we'll note when he arrives. Andy Wells,
Here.
Billy Clark,
Here.
Dirk, are you on Teams? Dirk Cody?
Yes, I am here.
All right, welcome. And Chuck McGrady.
Here.
So I will declare that we do have a quorum and declare the meeting open. And I'll take this opportunity to actually make an announcement in case you haven't followed it. We're going to have a new board member next month. Former Senator Kathy Harrington was just appointed to replace our former board member, Mr. Tillman. So Senator Harrington will be joining us next month and will be a welcome addition. I recall working with her on a lot of issues over the years. At one point, she and Senator Rabin were co-chairs of transportation. And so she has a great deal of transportation experience, and looking forward to her bringing that to our board. So we'll have a new face next month. Start with the ethics statement. In accordance with State Government Ethics Act, Executive Order Number 2, issued on January 12, 2009, and NCGS Section 143B-350, it is the duty of every board member to avoid both conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict. To comply with this statement and the state ethics law, I ask whether any board member has a known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the board today. If so, please identify the conflict or appearance of conflict when the item appears on the agenda for consideration. Refrain from any undue participation in the particular matter involved, and sign before our notary the declaration that has been provided to you for such purpose. We won't be having any votes during the work session today, so I'll come back to this tomorrow when we actually have votes and allow any board member to notify us of any conflicts per our usual process. So the first agenda topic today is the handout that you have for the Innovative Technology Program. It's available on the website also. And I'd like to thank the materials and test unit staff for putting this together each month. It's always fascinating to me to see the new products that we're evaluating to determine how we can continue to improve. The next agenda topic is the Division of Mitigation Services biannual budget. And this is for 2023 to 2025. And you've got a copy of that for your review. This will be an action item on our budget next month. If you have any questions, we can get you to the right person to answer those, and they'll be here next month as well. Jamie Lancaster is the new unit head for the Environmental Analysis Unit, and Jim Stanfill is the Deputy Director of the North Carolina Division of Mitigation Services, which is under DEQ. For those of you who may be newer to the board and haven't looked at this before, it's a really great program that we innovated, a decade or so ago. And it's really what allows us to build the things we build. And it is part of the process by which when we disturb wetlands, when we're building projects, then we can mitigate those. And this provides a efficient way for us to do it and saves us money and accomplishes all the goals of all the environmental laws as well. So it's a good program, and we've had a good partnership with DEQ for many years in administering it. So if you have any questions about this budget or the program, we'll get you to the right person. All right, our next agenda item is the legislative update. And at this time, I'd like to ask Lee Jackson, our Legislative Affairs Director, to come up and present an update. We need this.
Don't need that.
All right.
Quick update. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So a quick update on where we are in the legislative process. Still relatively early in the session. We have had agency bills filed on both the House and, as of yesterday, the Senate as well. So House 198 is the DOT bill, and House 199 is the DMV bill. I had sent the board an email earlier this week mentioning that there were provisions in both bills that came from the department and that did not come from the department. So I would be happy to go through those at anyone's request, offline if you have questions about those, but, that is well known downtown. And then on the Senate side, we have, Senate 577 is the DMV bill and Senate 580 is the DOT bill, mirror images of what was filed in the House. So we're expecting the House bills to go through, but again, it's early in the session, so, can't make any promises about that yet. And then the House budget has been filed as well, which is House 259. Again, really early in the process to comment. The House is expected to move it through their chamber very quickly. And then we will see what shows up on the Senate side. They're on spring break next week, so there should be no committee meetings other than maybe a skeletal session next week. And then we expect things to pick up and really start rolling after that. And that's my quick update. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, questions for Lee?
Lee, one question. There's been a bill introduced. It's SB 512 on Monday. Do you have any update on that?
I'll handle that. That is a bill that includes something about DOT in terms of restructuring the board. But it's one of, I think there's 7 or 8 boards that are potentially restructured and as I understand it, the changes would take place after anybody on this board, was serving. But Secretary and I have talked about it. It didn't get a lot of advance notice. A lot of senators, didn't know it was coming either as well. So it's still in the early stages of discussion. I would describe that as a discussion above my pay grade, in that seems to be an issue between about 3 people. So we'll see what happens. Any other questions, Chuck?
I just observe, the House is voting on the budget bill today and tomorrow, so it'll be done. This is the earliest I can recall them doing a budget. It'll be done and it'll be over in the Senate, and their agenda their calendar is really, I can't even imagine you'll get a budget when they think they're gonna get a budget, but who knows? And I will take you up on the understanding these bills. There are 2 or 3 provisions in the agency bill, as I communicated with you via email, that are, in my opinion, highly problematic. And they're not part of what talking to the secretary and the chairman, not what was put forward in the agency bill. For those, agency bills are bills that the agency sort of puts the bones in the bill, but then some flesh and fat get added to it later on. And I'm sure all these bills have just that. So it's a process, and I'm not anxious about it yet, but I would be very anxious if 1 or 2 of the provisions in the House bills, I haven't seen the Senate bills yet, were to pass. So I'll if I have problems later in the process, I'll raise them with the secretary and chairman of the board if necessary.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Just because it's an agency bill does not mean that we even know, right? And so that's been a lot of our discussion, because I think that's been something that has been kind of short-term memory loss for a lot of people, that just because it has an AB behind the title does not mean that the department requested it or even knew about it. And so that's been the case with some of these problematic provisions, and I think I could guess exactly which ones you're talking about. We do expect we've had good discussions about tweaking or removing some of those. And again, I have not seen a draft PCS yet, but we have on good faith that everyone is fully understands what our issues are. So, but again, I'll be glad to talk to any of you. My phone number is in the bottom of that email if for any of you who don't have it already.
Thank you.
Okay,
Any other
thank you.
questions for Lee? All right, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Yeah, Chuck, you're exactly right. In a theoretical world, an agency bill is technical corrections, not substantive policy, but that doesn't always occur, so.
Actually, the opposite is more often true than not.
Well, there are a number of people around the table, including yourself, who have some experience with that. So we will rely upon your guidance of that. All right, our next agenda topic is an update on the prioritization 7.0, and I'd like to invite Brian Wirt, our strategic prioritization manager, to come up and do an update on 7.0. Anything Brian's saying should not be a surprise to anybody. I think we've had him back about every month during this process, but as I've repeatedly said, this is where the sausage is made here. This is where the formula is made. So if you want some input on how, what projects our formula is spitting out, this is the place to have it. So I want everybody to have the chance to understand what's going on. So Brian, come on up.
There we go. All right. Thank you all for this opportunity to come and speak to you again. As the chairman mentioned, we've had the pleasure of coming to speak with you most every month since the start of the work group process. I think that level of communication has been very helpful, hearing from this group and keeping everybody informed of what the work group is going through and the issues before them as they try to craft a prioritization package to guide the P7 process. So our update today, we're going to start with the work group update. Give a further update on the modal allocation discussion, something that has previously been called normalization in the past. Give everybody a brief update on the upcoming topics, and then we have time at the end for questions and open discussions if there are any. So since we last spoke with this group, the work group has had 2 meetings, one in person and one virtual. That's consistent with the cycle that we've had. 2 meetings a month. We anticipate 2 additional meetings before we meet with this group again in May. And then as noted at our last meeting, we are coming up at the end of our work group cycle. We anticipate the last meeting to be May 9th, at which point in time we will have a complete package, and we will bring in that package to this group for adoption or revisions in June. So we'll be seeing you all in Charlotte, I think, if that's correct. So looking forward to that. Seeing everybody there. Want to walk us through our consensus log. We have had a few items that we reached consensus on since we last met. These include how we're going to handle points of interest within our scoring system. We have reached consensus on our bike and ped scoring methodology. So that's one more major component of the system that we have consensus on. We have begun scoring discussions on transit, on highway, on our flex policy items. And if we go to our prioritization process graphic, which is what we have just handed out, you can see from our graphic that we have started the discussion on all of our topics. So there's no new information left to bring to the work group. We're at this point wrapping things up, moving to consensus, and we anticipate a lot more movement on our meeting next Tuesday on wrapping up a few more of these items. And hope to have just a few remaining items to reach consensus on at that May 9th meeting. And so we'll move on to the modal allocation discussion. Again, we may have described this as normalization in the past. This is how we separate the funding between the various modes within NCDOT. And so the challenge that we have is that the intent of the STI legislation is to fund the best transportation projects regardless of mode. The difficulty is that we have different criteria and weights that we use within each mode, and that makes comparison between one mode and another mode very difficult. And so what we have come up with and what has been used in the past and what we are looking to revise is that modal allocation, which is the split of funds between highway and non-highway projects. You can see we've got highway on one side and our non-highway on the other. And just as a reminder, we do include all 6 modes of transportation that the department touches within our process. So that's highway, bike and ped, rail, public transportation, aviation, and ferry. Our current process allocates 90% of funding as a minimum to highway projects, 4% as a minimum to non-highway, and then we have a 6% flex in between there. One quick note that I do want to make sure everyone is aware of, this only pertains to our regional impact and division needs funding. Statewide is all quantitative and is regardless of mode. And so this modal allocation discussion doesn't apply to that 40% of funding that's attributed to the statewide mobility portion. It's just the 2 30% pots that are attributed to regional impact and division needs. And so you can see that there. So our conversations have been very forward, very positive. I do want to take a moment here and thank a lot of our work group members. This is a complicated discussion and there are a lot of priorities at play here. And our work group has really handled this in a very positive, straightforward manner. They are doing a great service to the state of North Carolina. I do want to take a minute to mention them, to give them credit. I also want to give credit to our facilitation group, Fountain Works, who has been really helpful in facilitating that discussion as well. Really happy with how they are operating. And so you may be asking, what did we discuss? So the work group has discussed the 4% minimum percentage for non-highway projects. There are some that are advocating for a 6% minimum or even higher. There has been no one advocating for reducing the 4% lower than the existing minimum. And then the other item that we're looking at is the highway minimum, which is right now 90%. No one is advocating for increasing the 90% minimum. There are conversations within the work group between maintaining it and lowering it. And we are working through that process right now. We are hoping to get consensus on this item in April. I think that is very important for our work group to wrap this up. We don't want to let this remain to the last item. I would also very much like the opportunity to present to you the recommendation on this topic in May ahead of the adoption of the entire package. I think that that's very important so that this group can have an opportunity to weigh in. If there's anything that they want to send back to the work group at that point in time, they would have that opportunity. Again, we are planning on having additional conversations in April, next Tuesday, with the goal of reaching consensus. We allocated the entire afternoon of our in-person meeting last time to this discussion topic, made a lot of great progress. We are allocating the entire morning session this time to this topic and hope to, again, make some great progress on that and come to consensus. So last item today is our upcoming topics. We have that modal allocation that we intend to finalize in April. We are also working with the rail unit on a rail modernization scoring system. We got some feedback from rail today on that process, and we're really excited about that. We think that that's a great opportunity to continue to improve our rail network and add capacity in a way that is short of dual tracking, which is something that our partners from CSX and Norfolk Southern are very interested in. They see that as a very large opportunity to improve that system. We are continuing to discuss transit facilities. As a matter of fact, we had a transit subcommittee meeting just this morning to discuss that, as well as microtransit. And then we will be finalizing those last three modal scorings, those being highway, transit, and rail. We have all of these items on the agenda for our next meeting on Tuesday. It is possible that we have consensus on all items. I don't think it's highly likely. I think there's just a few more items here, particularly some elements with transit and rail that the work group is going to want to discuss just a little bit more. But we do anticipate coming to a close on this and look forward to wrapping this up and then bringing our complete package back to you all. And again, we will be visiting you all down in Charlotte in June, seeking adoption on our package. With that, I'd love to open it up to questions and open discussion if there is any.
Questions for Brian? Stephen?
Mr. Chairman, it's not really a question. It's just, I think the waiting is so important to decide where we go. So we need time, I think, even if it's a special meeting or a committee session, sometime that we can get into those numbers with staff in detail.
Yeah, I would certainly encourage you, if you have any questions, Brian and his team would be glad to meet with you one-on-one or in small groups. Obviously, you can't more than 11 of us meet, or we'd have to notice a board meeting, but in any fashion that you need, they're happy to work with you.
Right.
And I think for me, being able to talk to them and say, well, show me how this project scored, show me how this project scored, and actually walk through it helped me understand how it works.
Yeah.
And it may be useful to y'all as well.
We had a very informative conversation in this room, I think, in August with a couple of members of the legislature where we did just that. And in just a couple of hours was really able to make a good connection and do a lot of education. And I think it's a very helpful opportunity. So yes, we're happy to do that.
I bring Kathy in.
Billy?
Brian, is the choice on the highway, is it 4% or 6%, or could it be 5%?
Yeah, so there's various options on the table. So there's the existing, which is 90% highway, 4% non-highway, and 6% flex. One option that was put forward was simply flopping the flex and non-highway. So that is out there. There are others that have been discussed that would lower the highway percentage. Those were generally in the 88% to 85% range. One option that was thrown out, I think, was 88% highway, 6% non-highway, and 6% flex. And so there is some discussion around those items. Yeah.
Well, one important thing to understand too is that the total amount of money that is spent on modal projects in the STIP is not the total amount of money that is spent on multimodal items, because within a lot of the highway projects, there are sidewalks or various
Correct.
aspects of modes. And and we've struggled to quantify that. I've been talking to Joey recently about, can we work on getting a better number for that? Because I think it's realistic to, we don't want to misrepresent that we're just spending this when in reality we're actually spending more.
There are also DA funds, direct attributable funds, that our MPOs control, our larger ones. And much of that funding is spent on non-highway projects, and that does not count towards the non-highway minimum. We just worked through a presentation to the work group at our last in-person meeting. David Wasserman was actually a huge help with that, of walking them through the process and some of the finer points on that. There are a lot of issues related to the order of operations that are important and help to paint a better picture. And we're, again, happy to have those conversations with you. The big takeaway with that, though, is that it generally leads to more non-highway than the minimums. So, yeah.
And historically, we almost always spend more than the 4%.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. We are well over 6%, and in many places up to 10% in some of those categories. Yes.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, sir.
All right, moving from prioritization to the end result, which is the STIP. I'm gonna ask Kevin Lacey, who's our Director of Strategic Planning and Programming, to come forward and present the final draft of the 2024-2023 STIP. Y'all have all lived through this process, and you know it is a process that is, the only thing constant is change in it. And you're well aware of, the different challenges we've had this time in terms of the cost estimates of projects, and having a gap between what we originally thought it was going to be and then what it's actually going to be. And those things have continued in that we've got it is a challenging environment, right now for construction cost. And Kevin's going to address some of those, and then some of the suggested changes that we're making to address those. So Kevin, if you could come on up, and how this impacts your individual divisions should not be a surprise to anybody, because you've been met with in the last couple of weeks to go over with you and the Ds kind of what all the changes are. My goal in the whole thing was, if there's pain, then everyone should feel some of that equally. So don't feel like you were being picked on. Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a long time coming. It's been, I guess, 4 years since we've been to this point. And that is introducing or having a final draft TIP before you. And so we're glad to have it ready, and hopefully we'll have approval of it in the next few months. Just a quick idea. The overall goal was to develop a physically constrained STIP. That's a requirement by law. Produce a 10-year STIP that, using the existing projects. As we know, We had a plethora of projects in the existing STIP. We canceled the prioritization process and we're using those projects and going from there. We also wanted to have some opportunities to program new projects with the work that Brian and the work group and others are doing across the state in the next P7 scoring. And ensure everything is grounded in state and federal requirements. So what we did is we took the current set of projects that were in there and we prioritized the delivery projects first. So those that were on the 12-month list, those that were in the first 2 years of the STIP, those that were going to right of way or right of way was underway, and then of course those that had federal grants. Those were given priority in the process, and then we went with the seniority approach of P3, P4, and P5. Once we did that, we gave all of the MPOs, RPOs, and the divisions the opportunity to say, well, here's what you got now. Do you want to swap some projects around? You know, make sure that the division and the MPO and RPO agreed on that. And if they did have projects they wanted to swap, there was some rules. You know, it wasn't a free for all, but what we did is allowed projects to be swapped within 10% of the cost, and you couldn't cascade up. You know, we couldn't take a division project and say, well, let's throw that into the statewide group. Good plan, not allowed. So here we are today. It's April 2023, and what you have been presented in our individual groups and what was sent out to everybody Monday is the projects that are affected by STI. So these are our STI projects. In another couple of weeks, hopefully by the end of the 1st of May, we'll send out the full STIP that has all the other projects that are not STI, that are subject to STI. And then in June, we'll ask you guys hopefully to approve and adopt that STIP, because we have to send it to federal highways. All the MPOs have to adopt their portion of the STIP as well. So what changed? We've had in April, in August, and now we have a new list of projects that have been affected over time. And each time the funding has changed slightly. We've had a correction in the federal dollars. What we had before is we had an estimate of what we believe the federal programs were going to send to North Carolina. Well, now we actually know. So, and we adjusted the out years based upon the years that we do know. We also had a change in the forecast. AMNA talked about that this morning. That came out to be somewhere in that neighborhood of $800 million over the 10-year period. We've also had some continued changes on estimates, cost estimates, cost overruns, low bid adjustments, and so forth. And one of the reasons that we held the meetings with each of the divisions and and the board members were not only to give you a heads up, but also get prepared for this conversation. I want to thank Mr. Lael for asking some very good questions and helping me be prepared to answer those questions today. One of those questions is that, we adjusted the STIP because of the cost estimates and so forth. Why are we still using cost estimates and overruns as a reason to delay projects? I want to show this estimate this slide. This was the construction cost index when we were adjusting last time. That construction cost index has continued to rise, as you see. It has hopefully started coming back down some. And so that's why when we update our estimates, when we advertise the projects, we still have to pay that dollar that comes in. There is no additional dollars. So if you wanted to let the project and you only have the X number of dollars, something has to get pushed out the end. And that's what we were doing in this process. So we ended up having $3.6 billion over the 10-year period. We've set aside $4.1 billion for inflation. And so we end up programming $32.2 billion over the 10-year period. Of all the projects that since the last adjustment, We've had 688 of them that didn't have a schedule change due to funding. Now, there will be projects that their schedule was changed for other reasons. All we're talking about today are the projects that that had their schedules moved due to funding only. And we're fortunate to keep about 91% of those projects on their existing schedule. And you can see here, there's 41 that received a 1-year delay. There's 8 that received a 2-year delay. And then, of course, there was 3 and 16. Some of them are now subject to reprioritization. Some of the process improvements that we're talking about, we feel the same struggle within the department. I think we actually are closer to it. And with all these different items of updated estimates and moving the schedules around. So we've been looking at various ways of how do we manage this in a business that has that much fluctuation, especially over short periods of time. So we started updating the cost estimates on a much more regular basis. And you can see this 7 months prior to right-of-way acquisition, 13 months prior to let, and a minimum every 24 months, we want to have updated estimates. So we have some idea about, will this project under the current or near current conditions. Reviewing the cost estimate practices to make sure that everything's in there. We've had issues in the past where they may not have had a line item filled out. Doesn't mean that line item is not going to take place. It just, it was kicked down the road a little bit. We need to make sure that we're not doing that. We have an overdraft policy, so we can't, that policy is don't exceed a certain dollar amount without going through the chief's office, making sure that, this overdraft is absolutely necessary. What's going on? Why didn't we plan for this, or what is the issues that created this overdraft greater than what was expected? And I didn't mean to skip this bullet, but I wanted to hold it to last. We're also looking at ways to contain some of these major cost estimates. Instead of having a few projects that really blow their estimates and affecting the entire state, how do we contain that, both geographically, time-wise, and those type things? So we're working on some practices of doing that. We already do that at the division level because you can't transfer division monies from one division to the next. So that's some of the things that we're looking at, is how to contain those issues. And so we don't necessarily have to have a statewide problem because a project in Division 15 missed its budget. 15 is, by the way, in Tennessee.
I don't know that board member.
This is you've seen this before. This is the normal STIP. The 24 to 28 is the schedule for delivery. The 29 to 33 is, preliminary engineering only. And then anything beyond 33 is not funded. Of course, those last 2 boxes are scheduled for reprioritization with P7.0. So the next step is I've gone over this, is review the proposed final STIP. We will request your approval in June. Once hopefully that passes, and if so, then we will send it to the MPOs and they'll take it up through their process. A lot of these MPOs and RPOs don't meet monthly, so that's why it needs a little bit additional time to work it into their schedule. And then once that's done, we'll send it to Federal Highways and hopefully receive a final STIP by September 30th. I did want to bring up and remind folks, this is a hard timeline. If we don't have a new STIP by September, then our current STIP expires and we won't be able to go to the next phase of other federal projects. This was discussed a couple of years ago when we chose to delay updating the STIP then. So just give everybody a little recall of that. And then this is again the programming for the next. Brian has kept you very informed on this over the I guess Brian and Jason have been doing a banner job of doing that for the last year. And any questions for me, Mr. Chairman?
Questions for Kevin? Stephen?
Kevin, this may be something that doesn't fit into your realm, but we had a call with Joy on Monday. It was a good call for Division 10 to look at.
Hey, is your mic on? I'm having a hard time hearing you. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, great.
That's
thank you.
unusual. You can't hear me, Mr.
I
Chairman.
know.
apologize.
I weigh on every word.
Did you unplug my mic? We had a really good call on Division 10 on, it's not necessarily cost overruns, but things that had changed. That was 250 million in that division. Do we have a statewide number?
When we talk about the project estimates and so forth. Yes, sir. I don't think we've summed up the whole statewide, but we can get that number.
Yeah.
What we did with each division is a similar exercise showing, well, here's where this project, this cost went up and so forth.
Do you have an
But we can
approximate
provide-
number? Are we talking billions or?
I think originally it was in the billions, but Lee. And you think about it, 10% with $36 billion, so 10% would still be in the billions. And I think we've seen more than a 10% cost increase on.
And the issue isn't so much the cost, it's what happens to the projects that have to be pushed out.
Yes, sir.
That's really the issue.
That money has to
We as
come
a
from
board.
somewhere. And it's, if you spend the money here and it costs more, then something has to get pushed out the end. Yes, sir.
Chuck, I think you had a question?
Yeah, the overdraft policy, how long has that policy been in place? Is that relatively new or is that?
A year, 2 years, right?
Well,
Or the new version of it?
the new version of it, I'm looking for chief, deputy chief, overdraft policy. How long has it been in place?
We've had an overdraft policy for a while, but we strengthened it recently.
Well, that's where exactly I'm going.
Yeah.
I have a suspicion the secretary knows the answer to this, but we had obviously some huge financial challenges in the 2019 period of time, 2018. And I'm assuming the strengthening the overdraft policy occurred with in trying to address those financial challenges.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and since the policy went in place in its strengthened form then, how often does that occur? Where a division has to come and get the chief to approve, substantially more money for a project? I'm not trying to get into any one project or anything like that. I'm just trying to figure out as a general matter, is it something you have to use a lot? Because you've got, a much higher number than what was projected when the project got started.
Let me give you kind of a little bit longer answer than what you're probably expecting. It was, I think, late last year when we went into a more strict overdraft policy where prior to that, we were saying if you had an overdraft, we had a lot of projects that were put in that had placeholder dollars and they were set up to have overdrafts. So Joey and the secretary said, we're not doing that. That's not a good business plan, which I think that.
That's where I'm going.
Yeah, that proved out in the previous thing. Now, we're supposed to be requesting the expectation, whatever the project is supposed to spend. And what there will be some overdrafts on those projects just because things happen.
Things happen.
But I do not believe that it's been hundreds of events. There may be some programs that have a lot of small projects like spot safety and stuff like that routinely have what sounds like large overdrafts percentage-wise.
Percentage-wise, but don't
but
really.
not very much money.
Their money at all.
But did we ever come up with about an estimate? Is it a plethora of these or is it just a handful?
I'd be guessing at a number, but it's more than you think.
All right.
That they're having to approve them pretty frequently.
Yeah, let me, if I can follow up on that.
Yeah.
Chairman, I'm not worried about, you get small projects and you get high percentages and they're really not that much money. Now, obviously, that's not the big issue here. The big issue is bigger projects that have maybe not as high a percentage, but the dollars are, you know, significant and can be affecting other projects. Because they've exploded. And now I'm just trying to get a sense. I'm not looking at any one project. I'm just trying to get a sense of just how much of a overdraft problem still exists, being aware of what the overdraft problem used to be.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, Board Member Grady, one of the things that the team has done, I'll tell you, is pay attention to the overdrafts. I think in the past, the word overdraft is, it's an overdraft. And it may hang out there longer than we would like for it to. This team has done a great job of administering these policies and also paying attention to the overdrafts and make sure they are covered. That's one of the things that we haven't done in the past. And our CFO has been, I'm looking at Chris, our chief, they have been in great communication about ensuring that these projects are covered and we have the funds to cover. So that's one thing I can tell you, that we have made that change to ensure that we are paying attention to the overdrafts and they're just not outliers.
Thank you for that response. And it is responsive to what I was trying to get at.
Just, Kevin, if you don't mind, just one additional thing in addition to what Secretary Boyd just said. About formalizing the process for covering the overdrafts is now accounted for as we look at the cash balance. So that is a big benefit of doing that.
Yeah.
Because it happens on a more regular basis than it was in the past.
It's sort of like checking your account and knowing where you are at any point in time.
Yes, sir.
And I would add too, you know, you see these. You're not on the front edge of them, but like we have an agenda item, item N, it will reflect some of these changes. If you review item N, and I know most of you probably look for your own particular area because you might not know about a particular project in Division 15. But you can see, where we have to add, $25 million because of cost increases, or it'll say why. So you get some visibility to that too, but you're more on the back end than the front end where the change is. I think, I've said this a dozen times and I firmly believe it. I think we have a good system, the STIP process for prioritizing projects and using data to do that. But when we changed over from the old way where the money was just allocated out to the divisions and the divisions decided how to spend it to this way, I think that was a good move. But one of the things that got lost in there at all the levels except the division level, as Kevin mentioned earlier, at the division level, you still get so much money per division. And if you run out of that, that's your own problem. But if you overspend, if Division 15 overspends on a regional project, then Division 16 is going to probably feel the brunt of that because it's likely that one of their projects will get delayed. And I think that's the policy that we're looking to continue to develop so that, one overspend doesn't impact, everybody else disproportionately. And so I think that would be a good thing to get back to. Plus, I feel very confident that, as Chuck indicated, through this process from 2018 and 2019, we've been putting in a lot of controls on the project, the scope creep, to some degree. A project gets in the STIP at $10 million, and then by the time you build it, it's 20 because people decided to add things to it. And projects sometimes need to change, but they need to be aware of the costs that go with that too. And our policy now is if it changes a certain amount, then it's got to go back and be reprioritized, which I think is the right thing to do. So I think we're slowly but surely cleaning up a lot of opportunities for things to get off the rails in terms of cost. So, and I appreciate the board's good work in participating in that.
Because they were a much more mature agency now than we have been in the past. One clarification, Division 16 is South Carolina.
Well, then we don't care if Tennessee, overruns South Carolina's budget. Don't tell Chrissy I said that. Yes, Leo.
It seems that these projections that we try to make are not we can't make them, and it's not anybody's fault except for the way things are. Is there any other way you can run the department without doing it on the basis of projections? You know, you got cash flow, you got a cash basis and accrual basis. We're in a situation where we don't have any control ourselves about what's gonna occur with these projects because they're gonna go up, or I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Leo. I hadn't thought about it like this before, but it would we're doing a 10-year plan. And yet our revenue forecasting is trying to look out 10 years. It would be like if the legislature tried to do a 10-year budget, but they know they've only got 2 years worth of revenue forecasts to depend on. It's a bit of guesswork to some degree. And you get a lot of it right, but sometimes you're off a little bit on it. And then you throw in, this time we got squeezed from all sides. We got squeezed on the revenue and squeezed on the cost. So.
But is it worth going out 10 years? We don't really, it's not gonna work, whatever we decide.
Yeah, I think our choice is the minimum we can do is 5. Is that right?
Yeah, we have to do, the feds approved the first 4. I believe there's some, environmental issues that require 5-year for air quality. So those are the minimums. I think the other thing that you got to look at is the timeline of taking a project from idea to ready to let as well. Because you got to have a substantial number of projects in the pipeline in order for them to get ready to let. So, and again, this is an abnormal year because we went so long between steps. We are developing new TIPs every 2 years. So we have that every 2-year adjustment opportunity. So I think that helps that. The years ago, we used to not let a project until we had the cash in the bank. That left a lot of money sitting there until you spent the project out. And I think we chose some time ago to go to the cash flow to get higher value on that construction dollar today.
Got a couple other questions, but I wanted to add one thing too to Kevin's answer. I think it's incumbent upon us as a department and board members too, to make sure that we're conveying the right expectations, because it's always been clear that only the first 5 years of the STIP are sort of locked in, that anything after that is really a developmental project. And I can't tell you, I'm sure everybody's had this experience. Somebody's project moves in year 9 and they're all concerned. And, I have to remind them that was not guaranteed. It's out there in the development stage. It means that's when, it's subject to being reprioritized. It's a good project, but, it's not locked in stone until you get within the 5 years. So, Brad and then Tony.
Yeah, this is perhaps more comment than a question, but the federal government requires the MTPs to be fiscally constrained, right?
Yes, sir.
And it's got to be an MTP project before you can even get to the STP, right?
It's got to be on both.
It's got to be on both, right? So to some extent, we're having to sort of you look in the crystal ball, regardless at the MPO level, for sure, see what these projects may do, or they can even translate down into STIP.
Yeah, and I like to think of it is that it does take a lot of time to get most transportation projects to the people who are actually going to build it. So you got to have some lead time, and that's what, again, setting up for that period of time. Because if we went and reprioritized every 2 years, and projects that we were working on don't go to let, and then we're starting all over, then we'd spend a lot of money doing nothing. And so I'm not saying that there's not a way to do it, but we can look and see what other folks are doing on similar type items. I think having a better means of looking at how to deal with the fluctuations of these changes may help us in the near term.
Tony?
That's kind of what I was getting at. Don't we, when we're projecting out, even if it's 5 years, have a reasonable amount of sort of statistical projecting that goes into, I mean, we don't just throw out a number and then let the chips fall where they are. I mean, there's a certain amount of built in, like we do an inflation factor. We talked at length about that in prior years and other types of things like that. So to some extent, you can bake that in to what's going on.
The only thing that's certain is whatever we bake in is not gonna be correct. Is it?
Sure.
Yeah.
But you know that things are going to happen
And
that
that's
we
what we're
can't
doing.
control.
That's
Right.
exactly what we're doing, sir. But I think some of the things that we're doing today and are developing will help us deal with some of the fluctuations of these things that change outside of our control.
Stephen?
Mr. Chairman, it's really a follow-up on what you said. I think it's incumbent upon the board when we know these projects are going to get postponed, that we get to the people who are expecting the projects before they read it in the paper or see some long list. I think that would help the credibility of the board tremendously.
That was one of the reasons we wanted each of you to have those individual meetings or the division meetings so that you'd have a heads up and have a chance to ask any questions you wanted to ask. Other questions or comments? For Kevin?
Step around here.
You've run the secretary off. I don't know. All right, and you're sticking around, right?
I was gonna leave, but yeah.
Or you're the next topic
Yes,
as
sir. I'll
well.
stand over here.
Yeah, so it's the Kevin show this afternoon. So the next topic is, well, so this will be back before you in June for final approval. So any questions you have or any concerns, make sure you connect with Kevin or the appropriate staff before then. The next topic is the update on the North Carolina Clean Transportation Plan. I think Chuck maybe had asked for an update on that. And the first thing I want to do is clear up something that I said wrong, which was I implied that we were going to vote on that, which was a mistake on my part. I'd forgotten it was out of an executive order, and the board doesn't vote on things out of executive orders. That's kind of out of our wheelhouse. So what the staff has been doing is per the direction of the governor, coming up with a plan to meet the goals of this executive order. And that's what Kevin's going to do a presentation on right now. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm gonna pass out the
that's not what you talking.
one side and on the other. That's the executive summary that's being passed around. If you've not had a chance to review it, but the North Carolina Clean Transportation Plan. Let's see, the button's not working there. I think you gotta cut that timing. It says use timing. Yeah. And the media controls. And I think play that in there. Yeah, I done click that too.
Got all kinds of skills, Kevin.
Yeah, obviously they don't work. You just wanna go to,
advance it for me?
yeah.
Yeah.
We'll go from there. As you know, the Governor Cooper has issued a number of executive orders on climate change and air quality. And you see some of the key points of those executive orders: to reduce emissions by 40% below 2005 levels. That was the 2018 item, and also zero emission vehicles have at least 80,000 of them by 2025. In 2022, Governor Cooper issued 2 additional executive orders. One of those included us to develop a clean transportation plan. But you can see there's some quite ambitious items in there to increase the registered zero emission vehicles to 1.25 million by 2030, and to reduce economy-wide emissions by 50% below 2005 levels by by 2030. Next slide, please. So this plan, the governor asked, put together, it was for North Carolina. It's not a DOT plan, but it's intended for everyone in North Carolina. It's going to take, other agencies. It's also encouraging advocacy or encouraging participation by, the public sector, the private sector, and nonprofit. It's going to take more than just, a single agency, and a single state to accomplish this if we were to meet those expectations. And of course, there's going to be some governance requirements. Something has to keep it moving. I call that the locomotion of the plan. And with a focus on equitable outcomes. This can't be, clean transportation can't be something that only the affluent get to experience. It needs to be for, everyone in North Carolina, across the state, across all economic sectors. Next slide. If you want to just leave it in that mode, I think that'll be fine. This was the projected timeline. January 7, 2022 is when the executive order was passed. You see a lot of activity took place. And April 6th, because April 7th is a holiday, we're going to hopefully have this to the governor's office tomorrow, promptly before the close of business. Next slide, please. There was 5 work groups that were developed through this. Light duty ZEVs, of course, we know what those are. Those are the things we use most days. Medium to heavy duty. These are the package trucks, the large trucks, construction vehicles, garbage vehicles. Fleet transition. This is school buses is a good fleet to think about here. But also the private sector has many fleet vehicles and so forth. Vehicle miles traveled. This is a trip that's prevented has no emissions. So that's all a vehicular trip with emissions that is prevented has no emissions. So that would be a 0 trip. And the clean transportation infrastructure. Next slide, please. The work group had 30 meetings. There was 220 plus participants with over 3,300 ideas. Those work groups had some cross-cutting themes, as you can see here: equitable access, education and outreach, incentives and finance, health impacts, economic, workforce development, and policies and programs. Did you get it? All right. So it ended up having 4 focus areas, but there were 2 additional focus areas that were overarching. Partnership, as I mentioned, this is going to be all hands on deck, needs to be involved in this. And then also equitable, equity, making sure that this isn't something just that the affluent get to experience clean air and those items. But you can see the items the 4 focus areas: governance, infrastructure, funding and finance, and community engagement. Quickly on the governance items, I'm not gonna read all these slides, but I'm gonna point out some of the key points on this. One of the recommendations were to create a dedicated transportation team, or DOT to have that dedicated transportation team. And it was primarily the way I look at it is it's dedicated resources to help get this plan moving in the state of North Carolina. And there will also need to be a clean transportation interagency task force. This is other agencies within the within North Carolina. And the purpose is to clarify responsibilities, resources, and coordination. Encourage agencies to align related policies and remove barriers to implementation of the North Carolina Clean Transportation recommendations. The focused on increased equitable outcomes in transportation planning. This is intended to say let's make sure we instead of just putting out notices that we're having meetings on projects or ideas and so forth. Let's make active efforts to reach out to those underserved communities, the community-based organizations and so forth, so they can and make sure that we take an active step that they do participate in the decision-making process. Ensure access and affordability to clean transportation. Again, this is not to make sure that again, it's for everyone. It focuses on the Justice 40 targets. And these are communities that have historically been misaligned or underserved. And the idea is let's make sure that we do have clean transportation alternatives and options that serve those communities as well. And evaluate and update the prioritization process. This is actually mentioned a couple times. And this one specifically talks about, working with the spot work group, see, well, how can clean transportation concepts be worked into the prioritization process? It's a great idea. Actually, I've listened into most of the meetings, and these items have come up just about every meeting. How do we get these type concepts worked into the prioritization process? If it was easy, it would have been done already. The work group have punted on a few of them and said, DOT, go back and try to figure out some of these items. And other ones, they said, well, we really know we'd like to be able to do this, but just can't see a path forward yet. So this is saying, let's not give up on this and on how we can meet the transportation needs of the state, but also provide it in a clean transportation future. Partner with utilities and promote clean transportation. This is making sure the Utilities Commission and utility companies are aware of the plan and can help support the implementation of it. If you're counting on a solid electrical grid to provide electricity to your chargers and all of a sudden it doesn't exist, that's a problem. So this is to make sure, hopefully, that those problems are resolved before we put the infrastructure in place there. Funding and finance is you can't do anything without the funding. This is a key item here, in my opinion. It's maximize existing funding to support clean transportation. There's a lot of funding available in this area that doesn't get fully utilized. Before we go and say, well, we need a whole bunch more money, let's make sure we're utilizing those funds first to their highest and best uses. So and I know an example in DOT is congestion mitigation, air quality funds. We haven't spent 100% of those funds that's eligible in that category. I don't know if we ever have, but it's traditionally one of the areas that we have not cashed out. There may be other funding programs and other agencies as well. And then the other one in funding and finances is, let's aggressively pursue the funding opportunities that's inside the Inflation Reduction Act and also the IIJA or the Bill Act. Let's aggressively pursue those discretionary grants. That is new money. That will be new money coming to the state, and there's lots of different opportunities in those bills, not only in the DOT portions, but also in some of the other portions of those bills. Infrastructure. Evaluate and deploy clean transportation infrastructure to support all types of fleet vehicles and applications. When we start thinking about, where are some hopefully good opportunities, we're working out through the NEVI program, looking at our alternative fuel corridors, making sure that there are charging opportunities along those corridors. But also when we start thinking about some of the fleet vehicles, we mentioned here school and transit bus fleets. School bus fleets are huge. Every morning we put thousands of school buses on the road every day. And most of the day they sit somewhere in a parking lot, either at school or at a schoolyard or a maintenance facility for the schools. Well, that's a perfect opportunity to charge them back up if we can get many of those vehicles charged. So there's some opportunities there. Not to mention all the other investing in, opportunities to have charging stations at parking rides, working with the private sector, making sure that there's, available parking, charging in their facilities as well. Expand transportation demand management. This is, what I was getting at a minute ago. If, a trip that is, a motor vehicle trip that is converted to a non-motorized trip or a zero emissions vehicle doesn't produce, emissions. That's a trip that you don't have to, if you can take that off the books, that's a good thing. So how do we encourage communities to develop in a manner that where, zero emission trips are more likely? That's a land use conversation, but we also have things that the state can help do. And from a DOT perspective, if you've not heard us talk about complete streets, and then we have done quite a bit of work in that area. We're still pushing those concepts. And shared mobility. That's another way of reducing a motor vehicle trip, where you have more than one purpose being served in a shuttle or a mass transit vehicle or something of that nature. Making sure that these options are available. Communications and engagement. Establish a coordinated clean transportation communication strategy. It's going to take more than someone saying, "Hey, go consider an electric vehicle, ride the bus, take a walk, whatever it is, in order for us to achieve the clean air goals that we're looking at, what the governor's established in the executive orders." It's going to take a planned communication strategy, not only to individual citizens, but to businesses, to other agencies, and so forth. So, and Mr. Chairman, that's my presentation. I believe this plan actually lays a good groundwork. It's a balanced groundwork for establishing a foundation that can promote over time a much more robust clean transportation system.
Questions or comments for Kevin? Chuck?
Yeah, I would just want to share my comments. I think they'll probably be surprising given my background, but the one of these public sessions was held in Hendersonville, and I went to it. It was apparently one of the better attended ones, even though there were not that many people there. A few days after that, I, having some concerns about the plan, I decided to put it in front of the Henderson County Transportation Advisory Committee, which is composed of public members, but basically every municipality in the county. And I will tell you, if you want to have a migraine, read this thing. I hope Kevin is right. It clearly is aspirational, but it's not in any way operational. There are pages here I've read 2 or 3 times, and I'm not sure I understand them. It's just, for me, it's gobbledygook. There's a lot of squirrely words. Prioritize, explore, identify, consider. Where's the beef here? What actually is going to occur? There's a lot of aspirational things, but I just don't see that. If I thought the aspirational piece was the executive order, which sort of set the parameters here, and this was going to operationalize what the governor has already said. Page 6. Well, there's lots of meetings. That's what I got out of that. Page 7, focus areas. It's really, that's the page that is really cute and looks nice. And I don't know what it says. Bottom line, I don't know what gets done at the end here. That is what came out of a discussion among a bunch of public officials and bunch of mostly advocates for this very sort of thing. Stood up and said, we don't know what it means. And I find myself in the same position. I'm just flummoxed by it. I'm really glad that the chairman said we don't have to vote on this thing. Sorry, Kevin.
No hard feelings, sir.
Next time, if we have a rerun at this, Chuck, we're gonna put you on the committee.
Oh, no, that's called purgatory in the Catholic faith.
Retaliation.
Yeah, this is not, yeah, that was not meant to punish you for your comments. It was to enlist your wise counsel. Other comments or questions? Like Chuck took, I
After
think
that,
Chuck
I
took
paid
the air
that.
out of the room. All right. Well, Chuck, thank you for your thoughtful comments. I do appreciate them. And one thing I can hope is it's better received at the governor's office than it was with you. So otherwise we might be getting it back. And if we do get it back, then I know where to come. So. All right, some general announcements. That's all our business items for this afternoon. Please remember to do your statement of economic interest. It's due later this month. Aurea is our new ethics liaison and Marilyn is our interim board secretary. They're both here today. If you have questions, dinner, for anyone who can come to dinner, tonight, reservations are at 6 p.m. at the Pit, which is a barbecue place, which is very good. It's about a 10-minute walk from the hotel. And if you're not planning on attending, please let Marilyn know so she can adjust the number for reservations. Our afternoon committees, we'll take a short break since we've run long. It's about 2:30 now. Let's start the committees at 2:40. And DMV will meet here in the boardroom, EDRs and the EIC, and then highways at 150 and multimodal and EIC. Hey, Andy, before you guys leave, I got something I want you and Tony to hear. Everybody make sure that you're here for the May meeting, because as many of you know, we used to have a picture of the Board of Transportation with the governor that hung in this room, but we haven't had one since the pandemic. And so we have arranged for the May meeting on Wednesday morning. So you probably need to make plans to come Tuesday night, but we're going to walk over at about 8:30 on Wednesday morning to the mansion. You can come park here and we'll just walk over as a group and get our photograph taken with the governor that morning. So I want to make sure everybody's aware of that and can plan on your attendance and dress appropriately. All right. Any other business for the work group? I'll declare us adjourned. Yes.